On Karen Strawn's video, Feed the Badger, Errors Will Multiply, a commentator, asked the following question. I don't really understand the argument for having these physical conferences. Aren't they just preaching to the converted? Who is going to pay for a ticket, especially one so expensive, who isn't already firmly on board with the men's rights movement? I sincerely apologize if you hear this all the time, and there's a really good argument for these events that I'm ignorant of. I do understand what you're saying in this video and why the tickets have to cost so much, and I'm not arguing that point. But I didn't really get an argument for why a conference like this is a good use of time or money in the first place. I'm going to start answering Errors Will Multiply's question by asking one of my own. I want you all listening to me to think about it. How disruptive is men's rights to our society? How much has to change to recognize men have issues? Think about that question, and I'll give you a few seconds to mull it over. While you're thinking about that question, I'd just like to mention that we're currently doing our fundraiser to get the Badgers to Britain for the International Conference on Men's Issues. While we're there, we're planning meetups in Amsterdam, London, and Manchester. If you'd like to make it possible for us to get to the conference and host those meetups, please direct your attention to the link here. We have 3 days left to get to the first goal. In crossing the chasm, marketing and selling disruptive products to mainstream customers, Thomas Moore describes the marketing landscape for disruptive technology. Moore is talking about products in the high technology field, but much of his analysis is applicable to any disruptive idea, including men's rights. Before Moore's analysis, this bell curve used to represent what people thought about the adoption of disruptive technology. The adoption cycle was believed to be a smooth and continuous transition from one market segment to another, from the early adopters to the laggard tail end. When companies got to this first point in the adoption cycle, they would scale up, increasing their spending, making new hires, expanding inventory in anticipation of exponential growth in sales. And then time and time again, that exponential growth would not materialize, and the companies who had just weeks before been congratulating themselves with lavish parties and champagne by the bucketful would find themselves scrambling to plug holes in the bottom of a ship that was suddenly taking on water. And then their company would sink below the waves, shipwrecked by some invisible force. How does this happen? Why do companies just about to take off end up tanking instead? Each section of the cycle represents a different attitude towards the potential inconvenience and discomfort involved in adopting a disruptive technology. Let's say there's a new way of getting around the city. It's more maneuverable than a bicycle, less dangerous than a skateboard, and you can get to where you want to go far faster than walking. But it requires you to learn how to drive it, and it requires you to figure out where to store it when you're done with it, because there's no infrastructure right now to deal with it when it's not in use. Ask yourself when you would buy that new people mover technology. If your answer is not till the learning curve is as flat as possible, and they have racks in every building to store one, you're probably part of the mainstream market for new technology. If you say, when hell freezes over, you're probably part of the laggards, who only adopt technology when the world around them gives them no other choice. And if you said, I already have a Segway collecting dust in my garage, you're probably a first adopter. The first market for a new technology is the innovators and disruptors, the people who are eager to embrace the new, because it is new. The second is the visionaries, those people who can see how a new technology can revolutionize how they do business. The third segment is the early majority, the pragmatists. They're only interested in a technology once it's proven to improve productivity, and they want to invest only in technology leaders that have full support of the marketplace. Then there is the late majority, the conservatives. The conservatives aren't as comfortable with new technology as the pragmatists, so they wait till the learning curve is as flat as possible before adopting it. Then there are the laggards. They don't want it? Screw you for making it. The reason why promising new technologies tank is because there is a chasm between first adopters, innovators and visionaries, and the early majority, the pragmatists. First adopters will embrace a new technology because it's new. The early majority only embraces it if it has social proof. In this case, social proof is your technology being used by other pragmatists. In fact, pragmatists will wait till a clear leader is visible in a marketplace before investing in their technology, which creates a catch-22. How do you make yourself the market leader before anyone invests in your offering? The reason why promising technologies like Segway lie broken at the bottom of the chasm, is because companies marketing them don't recognize that marketing to the early majority is a completely different game from marketing to first adopters, and they failed to adapt their sales and marketing strategies to that difference. Men's rights constitutes what I would call a disruptive social technology. Society is made possible by the average of the behaviors and choices an individual chooses day to day. So, for example, honoring your word, stopping at stoplights, paying for goods. All of these represent choices, specifically pro-social choices. They also represent an individual setting aside their individual benefit for the benefit of the whole. They represent adherence to abstract notions of fairness, justice, and good citizenship. Our identities as individuals are shaped by how we see ourselves benefiting our communities and societies. That's how an identity works. To live up to your positive identity, you have to put your personal needs aside and act for the benefit of the community you belong to. Anything else is just a label. Social technology is how identities are structured in order to elicit the pro-social behavior that forms the basis of a functioning society. A social technology can enable worldwide trading by promoting honoring your word, even if someone is not part of your tribe. A black lie is a black lie, regardless of who it is told to. That's just one example how a social technology enables a social system. There are many others. In fact, our entire existence is now defined by our social technology, and how our social technology enables our social systems that we rely on. How can I make such a sweeping claim? Do you know anyone who can live off the land using technology he can construct himself? Not living off the land with iron tools, but stone ones. He napped himself. I rest my case. We all live in a yellow submarine defined by how we treat each other. And how we treat each other is based on our identities. Disruptive technologies are technologies that are discontinuous from what has come before. Some technologies have slow advances that don't require people to change their behavior. An example might be new lens technology in glasses that change with lighting conditions. This is a new technology that does not require people to change their behavior to adopt to it, except perhaps reducing the inconvenience of switching glasses when they go from outside to inside or vice versa. Disruptive technology requires a radical change in behavior. For example, all of the behavioral changes required to transition from walking to segways. Our current social technology is a set of identities. The identity for men is save women, or save those vulnerable creatures women advocate for, such as children, animals, and minorities. This is the identity that men put their own needs aside to embody, that of savior. Women's identities, well, women don't have an identity, they have a label. They don't actually need to put their own needs aside to earn the label women. They are just women by virtue of puberty. Regardless, woman is granted social value, as we see clearly in things like disaster reports. 1 million people dead, including one woman. This is the current marketplace for social technology. Feminism might be considered a fairly profitable monopoly in this marketplace because it's managed to leverage a number of resource extraction operations to increase its overall female victimhood holdings, namely its exploitation of victimhood commodities in minority communities via the intersectional pipeline and the regressive stack. Feminism even uses the strip mining wasteland it leaves behind in minority communities as an excuse why more feminism is needed. As a novel social technology, men's rights is trying not to just disrupt an entrenched market leader, it's also trying to rewrite the rules of the marketplace entirely. Instead of defining themselves as the saviors of others, men's rights asks men to consider that they may need saving. This means men's rights is beyond a simple disruptive technology like automobiles and computers and segways. Men's rights is asking men and women to question fundamental aspects of how they structure their own identities. Questioning fundamental aspects of who you are is an experience akin to dying. Men's rights advocates are asking normal, everyday people to experience an induced death. There's life on the other side, of course, but the process of getting there is mind-numbingly terrifying. This is where the negative-sum game comes from. It's the rejection of certain knowledge in order to protect our identities as men and women. If you're on this side of that mental divide, and you got here not because you're the disagreeable sort of person who questions everything and questions things even harder when someone tells them that they can't question those things, and let's face it, men's rights is the biggest "you can't question that" in all of our society. If you're here because of something that happened to you, that ripped the blindfold off, think about how much pain you had to experience before you started questioning those fundamental aspects of your being. A lot. Can you really expect others to just accept what you're saying if you yourself had to go through something traumatic to do so? And it's also asking all of those physical institutions, those bricks and mortar institutions, media, academia, government, corporations, that have sprung up and existed comfortably in this marketplace for a century and a half, ever since Fourier invented feminism as a method of judging social progress by women's benefit, all of these physical institutions, to invest in an untried social technology. Again, social technology is how we structure our identities, which leads to synchronizing our collective choices and behaviors, which further leads to the creation of social systems that we all rely on. Men's rights advocates are asking to change all of that. That's a tall order. Can you think of a taller one? In Feed the Badger International Conference on Men's Issues, Karen explained why events like the ICMI have such expensive tickets and still can't cover their entire costs. It's because men's rights doesn't have corporate or government sponsorship, so the people interested in it have to fund it themselves. That's the definition of grassroots. That's also the definition of the first stage of an emerging market for a disruptive technology. At this stage, there isn't much funding or resources because most people aren't interested in the behavioral changes required to adopt a disruptive technology like men's rights. Everything is expensive and most of it is do-it-yourself. You don't get a ready-to-use computer off the shelf. You get a box of parts in the mail. You have to assemble. No big companies are willing to invest in it because it's untried. And their response is usually, "What is this? What does it do? How does it impact the bottom line?" And no one has an answer for that yet. Anita Sarkeesian, as a representative of the dominant monopoly, not only gets her travel and accommodations paid for when she goes to a speaking gig, she gets $10,000 a pop. That's if she hasn't increased her speaking fee. Now, not only are Karen and I not getting paid to speak, which is actually standard for experts in a field, we have to appeal to our own audience to get travel and accommodation and expenses paid for. This is the very definition of a first adopter marketplace. No sponsorships, no corporate interest. If you're lucky, government indifference. If you're unlucky, government obstructionism. As an interesting aside, gamers drove a lot of the early adoption of home computers. Wherever you find a disruptive technology, you usually find gamers pushing it into the mainstream. A while back, one of our patrons, Brendan, told me that he had also funded the Earl Silverman Center debacle, in which an individual walked away with funds earmarked for a men's shelter. I said, "Why did you do that? Couldn't you tell it was unlikely to pan out?" He said something to me I've had to think about for a very long time. He said, "If I judged initiatives by whether or not they would work, I thought they would work, I would never have supported other men's rights initiatives that did end up working." That's a first adopter attitude. First adopters often have fingers in many pies because they know some of them won't pan out, but the ones that do, are worth the risk. When their grandkids or grandnephews and nieces ask them what they were doing when this innovative and disruptive new technology was in its infancy, they can say, "I was right there, supporting it all the way." Now, how long will it take to get into the mainstream? How long it will take to get into the mainstream relies on other factors. But there's one thing for damn sure. Without first adopters, without you listening to me now, willing to do what it takes to keep a disruptive technology alive and in the public eye, even if it's in the public eye's periphery vision, it won't ever get to the mainstream. But that all still doesn't answer Errors Will Multiply's question. Why is it important, specifically, to support initiatives like the ICMI? Well, for starters, Errors Will Multiply may have got the financial causal arrow reversed here. Honey Badger Brigade, Fathers for Justice, and A Voice for Men aren't defining the marketplace. We're giving the first adopter marketplace what it wants to pay for. These events don't happen if people don't pay for them, and they pay for them because they want them to happen. First adopters love new ideas. They love new ways of doing things. But often their passion can keep them feeling isolated in a world of pragmatists who constantly ask, "Yeah, that sounds cool, but I just don't care. It doesn't impact me personally." Creating events and spaces where first adopters can not only explore the implications of their fascinating new technology, but form friendships while they do it, that's catnip to them. And what first adopters want is what defines the first adopter marketplace. So the first adopter marketplace is defined not only by difficult and expensive technology, but conventions, conferences, meetups, social events, where the pioneers can let their hair down and gush with other first adopters without being looked at cockeyed. Men's rights will never get to the stage where it can attempt to cross the chasm to the mainstream if it doesn't appeal to the first adopter marketplace. And ICMIs, talks, and meetups is what first adopters want. The opportunity to learn, the opportunity to share their enthusiasm for the new with others. In the words of a Honey Badger patron, codenamed Tiny Giraffe, why would anyone sneeze at the chance to meet you? The Melbourne meetup last year was a phenomenal good time. It was likely the best night of 2017 for me. Being able to speak your mind among so many open-minded people was a pleasure. I've managed to keep in contact with a couple of those attendees too. Tell the London Badgers that they will make friends. Do I think we can cross the chasm to the mainstream? Yes, I do. I think we can. But first we have to understand and adapt to the market that we are in right now, and ensure we can maintain it for as long as it takes to position ourselves for a chasm crossing. What's more, we have an ally on the other side, a very unexpected ally, one who may very well ensure we don't have to even attempt to cross. The mainstream market may end up building a bridge to come to us. Until the next installment of the Negative Sum Game, please do consider supporting our efforts in keeping the first adopter marketplace for men's rights alive. We have 3 days left on our Feed the Badger fundraiser to get the Badgers to London for the International Conference on Men's Issues. Link, wrong hand. Link here And if you want to support us on a per episode basis, please go to www.patreon.com/HoneyBadgerRadio. Thank you for being our first adopters. And to balance out Tiny Giraffe's positivity, I'll be reading some detractors. Sticky says, asking a bit soon, though, no? I just supported bringing your witnesses over for the trial. Maybe you guys should scale back a bit with the globetrotting if you actually need the help. Just saying. Hi, Sticky. If you need to know the story of why this ended up happening, when Karen and I agreed to go to the ICMI, our travel and accommodations were going to be paid for. Because feminists protested the ICMI at its original location, the organizer, Mike Buchanan, had to choose a significantly more expensive location, meaning he's unable to cover the cost for speakers' travel expenses. So here we are, appealing to you, whoever wants this to happen, so that the ICMI has every chance we can give it to be an enormous success. Benjamin Lupine says, A, I don't support anyone, and B, because you're less likely to accomplish your goals than resurrected Hitler is to become a pope and usher in a glorious new age of bunnies and peace. I guess you might be right, Benjamin, but I still plan to give it a go. And I do actually have a strategy for crossing the chasm. And I want to enjoy being part of a community that isn't currently trying to eat its face off. Have I got fake news for you, says. What, Karen's not going unless she gets everyone else to go? Lol. You're begging yet again, but you give me no reason to donate to you. Sorry, but I'm unsubbing. Feed the badger? Yeah, no, I think the badger is fat enough as it is. Shameless. If we aren't able to fund the Manchester meetup, Karen won't be going because none of us will be going. Because we won't be able to afford the meetup. Kundalini wants his hand back, says, your shills are doing more harm to the men's rights activist community than you proclaim to help it. Just fuck off. Everyone can see what you are doing and it is fucking sick. Thank you, Sticky, Benjamin, Fake News, and Kundalina for taking the time to write and express your concerns. I apologize if I can't address them because I do not know how. And thank you for listening this far. And once again, if you want to support, that's www.feedthebadger.com. Next episode of the Negative Sum Game Marketplace will cover how to appeal to the mainstream market and our unexpected ally on the other side.